These days, whenever a game comes out from a major developer or publisher, it seems like a guaranteed expectation that said game will release on most, if not all, major consoles and digital distribution platforms. Call of Duty, Street Fighter, Fortnite, you know, the big tentpole extravaganzas that want to reach the widest possible audience to maximize sales, potentials, and profits. It's to the point that whenever certain games, such as Tomb Raider or Deathloop for example, are released as timed exclusive deals where they're only available on a single platform for a solid year before appearing on competing consoles, there's a bit of an outcry from the fan bases who, you know, rightfully feel like they're being screwed over for choosing one console over the other, and now they have to wait an extra year before being able to play a much hyped game. Hell, with Microsoft's impending acquisition of Activision, the head of Sony is in a bit of a tizzy, demanding to ensure that Call of Duty will still appear on the PlayStation at the same time as the Xbox. Nobody wants to monopolize gaming, right? I can't cough without hiccuping. But I mean, literally, since the beginning of video gaming, one of the biggest appeals and draws to the business aspect of gaming is the ability to sell hardware. Whether it's a console or a new video card for your high-end PC, everyone in the market wants to nab certain games as exclusive titles in order to create killer apps that bring new customers in, not only to purchase said hot new game, but the console or the PC as well. After all, Naughty Dog is a Sony exclusive developer, and all of their games have released exclusively for the PlayStation. Halo remains an Xbox exclusive franchise, and there are literally dozens of Nintendo titles and characters which have only ever appeared in games published exclusively on Nintendo consoles. Exclusivity is a big win for manufacturers and businessmen, paying out huge sums of money for certain developers and games to appear only on their hardware, and that can be great. There are certain vibes and feels to games that exist only on a singular platform. After all, back in the 80s and 90s, if you told someone a game was either a Nintendo game or a Sega game, we all kind of immediately got an idea in our heads of what that game would look like or feel like. And pretty much up until the 7th generation of consoles, it continued that way. SNES, Sega CD, N64, Saturn, PS1, Dreamcast, GameCube, PS2, Xbox, up until it became more mainstream for supermassive tentpole blockbuster titles to release on all major systems at once. It was absolutely common practice for each of these systems to have their own games for their curated audiences. Of course, there were some titles here and there that appeared on multiple consoles at once, but these ports were usually handled by companies specifically designed around porting games to specific consoles. Oftentimes, it wasn't an in-house project to take a game you were working on and make multiple ports of it while developing the base game. This led to certain ports either looking different or having completely different mechanics. A great example are the Jurassic Park games for NES, SNES, and Genesis back in 1993. The NES and SNES titles were fairly similar with a top-down perspective for roaming the park, but the SNES version switched to a first-person perspective whenever you moved indoors. You know, I should do a video on this one someday. Meanwhile, the Genesis version featured side-scrolling gameplay and the option to play as either Alan Grant or, a Velociraptor. These individual and unique ports of what was essentially the same game also helped create hype surrounding different consoles. Like, hey, yeah, the Nintendo version might look and play like this, but the Super Nintendo version looks and plays like this. Even in the Saturn and PS1 era, different ports to these consoles could and would be wildly different due to the setup of the hardware and the need to create something unique for said system. When I was a kid, if you wanted to play a game but didn't have, say, a Super Nintendo, you needed to go over to a friend's house who did have one to play the game. Same thing with a Genesis or N64 or PlayStation. Those things cost money back in the day, and gaming wasn't the ubiquitous mass media machine that it's become today. No, much like the MCU, once upon a time, it was the residence of geeks and nerds and kids who wanted an escape from reality. Of course, it also created rivalries between gaming companies, rivalries which can still be felt reverberating to this day. Me, personally, I've never been an Xbox fan. I never will be an Xbox fan, and I can't for the life of me think of a situation where I will ever stop and look at what Xbox is producing and think, oh man, I better hop on over to that platform and buy me an Xbox so I can buy those games. Sega fans sneered at Nintendo kids. PlayStation fans laughed at the Saturn. We had rules. We had a code. It's like we were a bunch of exaggerated street gangs in matching outfits defending our turf from rival gangs. Nowadays, it's anyone's game on anyone's platform. People own multiple consoles. There's no real rivalry anymore. Which, of course, feeds into the downside of cross-platform exclusivity. There's a lot of great games that have gone unplayed by gamers who would probably love them if it was released on a console that they already owned. Case in point, up until recently, I've never played Halo. Sure, about a decade ago, I did some split-screen multiplayer Halo 4 with some friends only because they were all bored of playing Modern Warfare 3 and wanted to do something different. But I'll be damned if I remember anything about it. It was an Xbox game and I don't jive with Xbox, so I never played Halo proper. Oh, baby, coming around now and finally playing it on PC through the Master Chief Collection? Sweet Jesus, I finally understand why everyone and their dad went nuts for this game back in the day, and still do. And that's a goddamn shame, because I would have loved to experience that as it was originally coming out. And now I wonder just how many games have passed me by simply because they were on a platform I either didn't have or didn't want. Games I absolutely could have fucked with, and yet I am none the wiser about it. Well, I lead in with all of this because today's entry in the history of FPS feels like it is one of those games. Something that should have been more widely recognized, and hell, probably would have been more widely recognized if it wasn't for the platform it had been released on. The game I'm talking about is Marathon, developed by Bungie Studios, released on December 21st, 1994, exclusively for Macintosh computers. Now, of course, at the time, Bungie was no stranger to Apple. The studio, if you could call it that at the time, was founded in 1991 by Alex Serapian, who would later be joined by Jason Jones, forming the two-man crew of Bungie. As solo projects, Serapian developed and released Nop, a freeware Pong clone, and Operation Desert Storm. And after Jones joined on, they both developed Minotaur, the Labyrinths of Crete. All of these did modest numbers, but nothing spectacular enough to garner Bungie either money enough or attention enough to keep them going for much longer. Minotaur pulled in enough numbers to fund another project for the duo, which led to them developing the dungeon-crawling shooter Pathways Into Darkness. Now, here's where I start dovetailing my elongated opening about the pros and cons of exclusivity into my overarching narrative here because, and I shit you not, I had never heard of Pathways Into Darkness or Marathon until earlier this year. Like, I discovered Marathon while doing research for the History of FPS project, and only discovered Pathways Into Darkness through Mandalore's video just recently. Pathways was an ambitious project that became a critical and commercial success, enough so that Bungie could move themselves out of the one-bedroom apartment used as a development house and into a studio in Chicago, which, was located behind a crack house. But it was here that development began on Bungie's next game, a first-person shooter called Marathon. It originally started as a full sequel to Pathways, but evolved over time into a sci-fi game. Bungie took criticisms of Pathways to heart, such as the cumbersome UI and the slow gameplay, informing how Marathon's HUD would operate alongside faster, more intense gameplay overall, but they still wanted to put a heavy focus on narrative in the game, just like with their deep storytelling in Pathways. In January of 1994, Bungie strode into the San Francisco Macworld Expo with their initial build of Marathon, at the time titled Marathon Zero, confident that their changes to their systems would quell previous complaints about how Pathways played. But instead they received a resounding meh from expo goers, who looked at the product and just kind of dismissed it as a barely updated version of Pathways. This, however, did not discourage Bungie from pushing forward and reaching higher. Jason Jones, the Bungie tech guy, enlisted Ryan Martell to help him rewrite their technology, updating the Pathways engine, modifying it, working on AI responses and scripting, on enhancements to the engine structure. Hired on to write the game's story was Greg Kirkpatrick, while artist Reginald Dujour entered the scene for the game's visuals. Eventually, Alan Roy would also be brought into development, and he created the multiplayer components of the game, something that Bungie hadn't really planned to do at first. After reworking everything from the ground up, Bungie officially announced the game on July 25th, 1994, and proudly showed it off to the public at the Boston Macworld Expo that August. People were blown away this time around, demanding a release date and the option to pre-order, which Bungie, again, confidently accepted money for said pre-orders, informing customers that the game would be releasing in about 2 weeks. Which, it turned out to not be true. Not because of any big hitches or hangups or behind-the-scenes tomfoolery. Oh no, the game really was in a state that could ship in 2 weeks, and Bungie had every intention of doing so at the time. But when Bungie went back to play through the game again and finalized testing, they discovered that they were Well, they thought the game they built was boring. So, in an absolute Sigma Chad move, they made the decision to literally remake all 27 of the game's maps from scratch and spent an additional 4 months reworking the entire single-player campaign. The HUD, the level balancing, the details of the narrative, no stone was unturned. The Bungie boys were working 14-hour days, and at one point were told that no one was going home until everyone on staff had played through the entire game all the way through twice. They called this method play till you puke, and yeah, toxic crunch mentality goes all the way back to the early days, kids. But they all put their whole back into it. And on December 14th, 1994, Bungie officially declared that Marathon was complete, and a week later released their game into the world to near universal praise. 4- and 5-star reviews came in like a tidal wave. The game sold over 100,000 units, and when Bungie returned to the San Francisco Macworld Expo in 1995, not only were they met with open arms and critical praise, but they ran a multiplayer tournament during the show with a Power Mac computer going to the victor, and they sold out of every single copy of Marathon that they had brought along with them. Marathon absolutely steamrolled across other Mac shooters, and with the popularity of the base game combined with the popularity of the multiplayer, it was a given that Bungie would eventually produce a sequel, Marathon 2, Durandal, something which I will be getting to in the next batch of history videos because holy shit, kids, I originally walked into this video thinking I would just cover the first game in the Marathon trilogy. Yes, trilogy. Marathon is a trilogy of games that I didn't know existed until earlier this year. And I figured I'd only cover the first one, but after playing this, whew, kids, I have to play and review the history of the other 2 games here. Marathon, due to the Macintosh exclusivity of the game, feels like a forgotten classic to me. Now I know, there are plenty of people who know about this game and are eager to talk about it. A brief search on YouTube will quickly confirm that one. But back in the day, just like with Nintendo and Sega and PlayStation and Xbox, if you didn't have a Mac, you probably never heard of any of the games that it ran. I read all kinds of gaming magazines, and I'll be honest, not a single one of them covered Mac games. Mac felt like, I don't know, let's just say that if computer gaming in the 90s was a nerdy endeavor, then Mac gaming was super nerdy. Apple wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. I mean, these days, you can't go 5 feet without seeing an iPhone or an iPod or an iPad or an I don't give a shit. Apple eventually found its footing in the tech world, even if it still can't figure out how to make it in the gaming world. And it's not like they didn't try. Back in 1996, during the height of the console wars, with the 3DO and the Jaguar attempting to compete alongside the Saturn, Dreamcast, PlayStation, and N64, Apple released their own console called the Pippin, which performed so terribly that the console's lifespan lasted only a year. Imagine that. An Apple product that died within a year. Meanwhile, Marathon, being a Mac game, was nowhere near any radar that I knew of ever when I was a kid, because Mac gaming just didn't cross over to the world of PCs and consoles, so it didn't get coverage in any magazines that I read, which is a huge shame because this game, I'm about to get into talking about it, I promise, but before I do, I want to note that Marathon is incredibly easy to find and play today, thanks to the work of a fan port called Aleph 1, which is based on the source code from Marathon 2 that Bungie released for free back in 1999, you can download all 3 Marathon games now for the low price of absolutely free. Yep, 100% free. And the port is solid too. It ran beautifully on my computer with no stutters or slowdowns or any complexity to get it up and running. There will be a link in the description to find Aleph 1 and grab Marathon for yourselves, kids, because once we're done talking about it today, I have a strong feeling some of you are going to want to try this out for yourselves. And I really hope you do, because we are about to take a ride. The game opens up with the player character, a security officer only referred to as Mjolnir Recon number 54, arriving on the colony transport vessel UESC Marathon via shuttlecraft. Right now, the Marathon is mysteriously under attack from an alien species known as the Four, who are boarding the ship and overwhelming both the physical and digital security forces on board. You see, the ship is operated by a trio of artificial intelligences, Leela, Durandal, and Tycho. Leela is the AI that the security officer has primary contact with, seeing how both Durandal and Tycho appear to be either offline or being interfered with. Leela gives us updates on the fourth threat throughout the game and directs us where to go in an attempt to curtail their incursion and liberate the rest of the marathon. Leela communicates through a series of terminals we can find in multiple places throughout the map, each one offering new info and or objectives for us to hit as we move forward. In addition to information terminals, the security officer will find pattern buffers which act as the means for us to save our game. They're scattered here and there across each map, and half the tension of the game is trying to track one down the moment you enter a new mission because there's no autosave whenever a map opens up. Another interface we'll be looking for throughout the game are shield recharge stations, which act as your health. There aren't any health pickups in the game, so you'll have to find a recharge station and stand still while it refills the health bar. Further on in the game, there will be stations which overcharge your shields up to 3 times the normal amount, which is real fucking handy for some of the more harried combat scenarios we'll find ourselves in. The HUD that we get to work with is spare, but super useful. You've got your health and oxygen meters down here, a motion tracker right beside the health bar, which is incredibly useful, but note that it's a motion tracker and not a radar. It'll only light up any enemies that are actually moving, so if there's anyone standing still around a corner, for example, it won't show up. And then over here, we've got our weapon display with ammo and what we're currently armed with. While this is really well presented and clean, when Marathon originally shipped, the HUD looked like this. Yeah, that's a little clunky. Fortunately, the Aleph 1 port presents the game as you see it in my footage. I tried to reset the HUD and the options just so I could get some gameplay footage with it, but I couldn't actually figure out how to do so, and I wasn't about to go fiddling and searching the internet for tips on how to make it work, so you just get a screenshot of it and we get to move forward. Now, this is the kind of mysterious setup that we've seen maybe a dozen times over in science fiction. Aliens arrive out of nowhere, so they start shooting, a mystery begins to reveal itself. You know, it's a trope for a reason. We've got all the hallmarks of decent sci-fi and basic FPS paper-thin plot. Except the game isn't content to just rest on that setup alone. Oh no, we've got an actual story to go through, kids. In the opening? Whoosh, sheesh. Okay, so you know how Doom opens up with that heavy guitar riff and you get a pistol and then you pick up a shotgun and you're just laying waste to zombies left and right? Marathon does things a little differently. You hear that soundtrack? That's the work of Bungie founding father Alex Serapian, whose work here is beautifully haunting. Most of the game features slower, somber musical cues across the breadth of the levels, enhancing the sensation of being alone and isolated against an overwhelming force bearing down on you. Occasionally, the music tracks get a touch more up-tempo, raising a sense of urgency while still feeling lonesome. Interestingly enough, some of the tracks reminded me of darkwave bands like Soft Kill and Drab Majesty. I think overall there was maybe 1, possibly 2 tracks that I didn't really care for, as they felt a little too whimsical, but for the most part the game's score is filled to the brim with an isolationist tonality that perfectly services the atmosphere of the game. let's recap our opening. We've got a magnum pistol, a group of strange aliens attempting to bottleneck us right away, accompanied by a haunting, almost mournful MIDI track playing in the background. It reminds me of densely layered sci-fi films like Sphere and Prometheus, which sets us up with baffling imagery and concepts that slowly unfurl like a puzzle box towards an intriguing revelation and even more questions at the end. Continuing forward through the first map, the design presents us with a series of twisting corridors and maze-like back areas that we need to travel through in order to reach our first objective, which is a teleport pad utilized to warp us to the next point of interest. Teleporters are used to end every level of the game and will sometimes appear mid-level as well to warp our security officer around to different hotspots in order to complete objectives. But while Doom goes for the throat with the heavy metal power fantasy, Marathon does its best to make the player feel alone and isolated and submerged in a feeling of dread as they stalk the corridors of the ship. See, the enemy is everywhere, potentially around any and every corner we find, and while we're starting out with a decent pistol and, frankly, an overpowered punch, Marathon isn't going to take it easy on the player. Swarms of enemies will appear at any time and come bearing down like wasps, and while the first enemies we encounter are the 4 fighters, to make things creepier, there are cybernetic enemies called the Sphit, who break up into harsh white noise and static whenever we land an attack on them. The Sphit, it turns out, are a completely different species that the 4 enslaved once upon a time. We'll see other enemies throughout the game that are other species that the 4 have also enslaved, but while we might be doing some hunting throughout the marathon to find a way to get rid of the 4 incursion, there are a lot more of them than there are of us, and as such there's a deeply ominous atmosphere cast over the proceedings right from the jump. Now, I'm going to get into the story details in a different section of this video because there's a kind of a lot going on with the story in this game, which is wild for a computer game from 1994, and you know what? I want to save all of that for its own segments and offer no spoilers till we get there. I want to go over how the game plays and feels first. Off the jump, Marathon reminds me a lot of Hexen, a game that wouldn't release for close to another year after this release. Hell, Marathon dropped a couple of days before Heretic did in 1994, which is really showing just how ahead of the curve Bungie was. Much like Hexen though, Marathon is creepy and foreboding, constantly making the player feel unsafe as they navigate darkened environments and scramble back and forth across maps searching for clues and switches to activate doors. Throughout the course of the game, it is rare for us as players to experience any kind of power fantasy in Marathon. Sure, we pick up a variety of weapons and can blow up aliens real good with them, but the amount of damage that enemies do and the sheer volume we encounter make it so that we're constantly outnumbered, outgunned, and out of our league. It's not uncommon to walk into rooms and suddenly face a crowd of a dozen 4, and depending on the enemy variety in the area, you could be looking at 20 or so projectiles crisscrossing around your position if you're not careful enough to stay on the move. As usual, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so let's talk game mechanics. Marathon is often cited as the originator of such gameplay innovations as full mouse look, dual wielding, alt fire modes for weapons, and rocket jumping. But another innovation Marathon included was full voice chat during multiplayer as well. The mouse look is really the neat trick that Marathon pulls off, especially when compared to other games in the history of FPS that we've covered so far. System Shock had the ability to look around using the mouse, but that mechanic involved clicking an icon to change your character's perspective to look around in real time. The viewpoint wasn't controlled directly by moving the mouse itself, whereas here, Bungie's game engine provides fully 3D environments with somewhat limited up and down mouse look. Dual wielding is another instant innovation. During the course of the game, the security officer will pick up a second Magnum pistol, and the alt fire mode for the Magnum is to pull out the second gun and go guns akimbo. Of course, while this is admittedly cool, the fun factor can be slightly hampered by the fact that Marathon also features a reloading mechanic, and each pistol needs to be reloaded separately. So you'll be bearing down on the 4, guns blazing, and then suddenly you'll take something like a full 5 seconds to reload both pistols and then start shooting again. Reloading, meanwhile, doesn't have the same agency as in System Shock, where you have to reload manually or you don't reload at all. Here, there is no manual reload option, so you can't pop in a new magazine or drum until you've fired the last bullet you have in the chamber. I'm not gonna lie, there were times when that really screwed me up and screwed me over. It definitely adds a tactical sensibility to the combat, wandering through the darkened hallways, always checking the HUD to see how many bullets you have currently, and being mindful that firing too wildly could lead to you being forced to reload at the absolute worst worst possible time. Few things are as stressful as having to stop to reload while being surrounded by half a dozen enemies in this fucking game, let me tell you. And considering how slowly the security officer swaps between weapons, it's kind of a crapshoot as to which is going to be quicker. Reload your current weapon or swap to another one. Speaking of weapons, let's talk about the arsenal for a second here. We've got basic melee attack, magnum pistol, assault rifle, fusion pistol, rocket launcher, flamethrower, and another weapon which I'll talk about in the story section, because there's honestly a lot of this game that I think is much better when experienced for the very first time. And where most of my history videos are assuming that you've played the game previously, with this one I want to preserve some of the magic if you haven't already. These are all really solid weapons, which also serve as forerunners to weaponry that Bungie would employ in Halo. You see what I did there? As mentioned already, the Magnum is serviceable and operates primarily as your fallback weapon to conserve rifle ammo in the early half of the game, and honestly stays pretty handy throughout the whole playthrough, especially once you pick up the second Magnum. The melee is broken to an absurd degree. Not that you can take out an enemy in 2 or 3 punches, no, you have to stand there for a bit and whack away. But here's the thing, for like 80% of the enemies in this game, if you're not completely surrounded, you can stand in one spot and pound away and essentially stun lock enemies until they're dead from your fists. And furthermore, utilizing the physics in the game, your punch damage is also directly related to how fast you're going. So if you have a full head of steam and you punch a lower tier enemy, you can easily one-hit them with your melee attack. It's certainly not the most viable option in the second half of the game, but it sure is a lot of fucking fun in the beginning. The assault rifle is going to be your workhorse throughout most of the game. It is wildly inaccurate, but it will be your #1 method of cutting down waves of 4 as you trek through the marathon. Seriously, the spread on this thing from a distance is like absolutely ludicrous, but up close and personal, you'll turn enemies into Swiss cheese like nothing. Another downside is that you will churn through ammo almost instantly, leading to inopportune reloads, but that high rate of fire, again, Swiss cheese, man. It also has a grenade launcher for an alt fire, which is great because Marathon's mechanics make it so that you don't have to pick primary fire or alt fire. You can hold down both mouse buttons simultaneously, so you're blasting fools while constantly spamming grenades for crowd control. Alright, there's a little bit of power fantasy mixed in here. And this here is where the game's rocket jumping mechanic comes in. See, the actual rocket launcher is too powerful to attempt to actually jump with it because you'll just kill yourself with the splash damage. Instead, Marathon's method is what's known as grenade hopping. It's a little tricky to pull off, but you have to stand beside a wall, aim at like a 45-degree angle, and fire both the primary and alt fire at the same time while running forward. Somehow the physics make it so that you start rising into the air, and I don't completely understand how it operates. I mean, I couldn't quite get the hang of it myself, but if you want to read certain secrets in the game, then you're going to have to figure out how to master it. The fusion pistol is your secondary workhorse. Unlike the Magnum and the assault rifle, the fusion gun fires plasma projectiles rather than hit scan, but these projectiles hit super hard. Once you find it, you'll also find plenty of ammo throughout the ship, so this became my fallback weapon when I felt like I was getting a little too low on rifle ammo. The fusion pistol also has a secondary fire where you can charge up a stronger shot to either one-hit kill or severely weaken enemies, but don't hold it down for too long or the gun will literally explode in your hands. The rocket launcher is a rocket launcher. It does what it says on the box. Like I mentioned a moment ago, these rockets are insanely powerful though, with a massive blast radius, so be really cautious when using them, and do not ever use them in close quarters. And the flamethrower... This is so fucking awesome. Any unarmored enemies will go down real fast in the face of the flamethrower, burning into crispy husks as they do. Some enemies won't drop weapons if you burn them, however, and armored enemies just plain aren't affected by it, but otherwise, flame away to your heart's content. I do get a little giggle out of the shrill bird cry the 4 let out whenever they're burned to death by the flamethrower. It's a nice little extra fuck you. Now, each weapon in your arsenal is going to feel really good to use. They're all adaptive to most situations, and to be honest, the game gets bonus points for having a satisfying and effective flamethrower weapon in 1994. But the reloading mechanic is going to hinder things at best and totally screw you over at worst. I had multiple times where I only had 1 or 2 bullets left in my current clip in whichever weapon I was using, so I just emptied them in order to force a reload rather than have to deal with reloading in the middle of combat, which isn't really ideal, but you know. It also forces you to carefully consider how you're entering a combat situation versus just striding in and laying waste to everything around you. It balances out the gameplay and serves Marathon's ominous atmosphere. You just never truly feel safe because you could have to reload your weapon at any given point while being assaulted from all angles. And the enemies who will be coming at you are no slouches for that matter. For starters, you've got the four themselves. You'll meet them first, kind of looking like the Martians from John Carter, wielding energy staffs, and while the green and purple ones are melee only, the red and blue ones can throw an energy projectile your way, so don't let your guard down for an instant with any of them. Moving up the four chain are the four troopers, who have either assault rifles or grenade launchers. And then finally, the four hunters, armored motherfuckers with predator shoulder cannons. Just like the fighters, the troopers and hunters also have tougher variants that come in a different color to help you distinguish which ones are going to be a greater threat, which is honestly handy and easy to recognize even in a crowded firefight. We've also got a couple of different alien races that have been enslaved by the four who are now forced to fight for them. I mentioned the Sphit already. These cybernetic monk-looking creatures are exhaustingly interesting to look at and contemplate. Just like with the four, there are two variants, green and yellow. The green ones hover about ominously, arms crossed over their chest piece, sometimes firing green projectiles your way. And the yellow ones, while mostly performing the same way, their projectiles will home in on you, so you'll need to bounce around corners in order to escape them. Oh, and some of them are cloaked, leading to moments where you'll think you've cleared a room of enemies or there's no one around, and then suddenly there's a shadowy form moving towards you, firing off bolts of energy, and you're taking way more damage than you have any right to. But the Sphit are quite possibly the single most fascinating characters in the game. Leela, at one point, lets us know that the Sphit are connecting to the Marathon's internal systems, which explains why we will find many of them hovering about in front of the terminals like they're interfacing. Because of this, Leela figured out how to piggyback into their individual networks, learning that the Sphit are something like 10 to 20% organic mass, and the rest of their bodies are all cybernetic and mechanic constructs. It's hard to even say for certain how much of them exist in the physical world. I mentioned before that when the Sphit take damage, their bodies shimmer with static and they emit some kind of white noise effect as they do. And when you kill one, they simply vanish, as though the signal that had been broadcasting their form has now been turned off. It's even more fascinating to think about when you consider that while every other enemy in the game leaves behind a body, the Sphit don't. They just vanish. Once we get into the story and spoilers, that will become even more interesting. Now, as I mentioned above, there are a number of other species that the four have enslaved and used to fight for them, but rather than go into all of them individually, I'll just say that there's a good variety of enemies here that serve as different combat obstacles, and I felt like they are all really well balanced towards not only keeping the player on their toes tactically, but in keeping combat fresh. Regardless, it's the four and the Sphit who are the two main enemies that we have to tackle over the whole of the campaign. And since we've gone over the basics of weapons, enemies, and interface, let's get into the gameplay and level design. Alright, so the level design, the level design of the gameplay. Look, for the most part, I actually really enjoy the level design here in Marathon. I ended up playing this game twice in a row, back to back, absolutely enthralled with my experience so much that I was immediately compelled to go back and replay the whole damn thing. Part of that is because of the story, but we're getting there. That said, like with many games, sometimes there are high notes that hit really high, and there are low notes that can make you so very frustrated. But when the high notes outnumber the low, you can kind of forget that the low notes hit the way that they do. And Marathon is 100% smack dab in that category. Unlike, say, Doom 2, rather than go through each of the 27 levels one by one, we're just gonna overview this shit. These history videos end up being lengthier than my other videos, but here, 27 levels, all of them deep and wide and abstract and nah. Also, part of the absolute joy of this game is discovering how it works. It's such a wonderful example of how to do excellent visual design, in that the player will be met with certain elements of the game, and yet the game near effortlessly guides the player into how to go about solving these environmental puzzles. So much so that when similar elements pop up again later, the player is already cued in and ready to rock and roll. It's so good. Of course, these often brilliant design elements are also wrapped around some of the biggest dick moves I've yet to see in these history videos, like you thought Doom 2 did some stuff to fuck with the player? Then you haven't seen anything. Now, one of the things that Marathon's engine allows for is rooms over rooms, something that Doom wasn't able to do at that time, and this helps to craft some deeply intricate and exceptional maps. You've got stairs and elevators, and spiraling stairwells, layers on top of layers, crafted in such a way as to both feel gentle to navigate and also insidiously confusing. I mentioned that this game reminds me of Hexen in mood and tone, but also in level design and switch hunting. The game features a very powerful auto map system, so as you meander through the game, you'll be able to check your whereabouts and discern which places you've been already, and also navigate back through the maze-like corridors so you don't get lost on your way back to a specific spot. Because the abstract design makes it so that you'll be running back and forth across the map multiple times in order to find everything you need, or to just run back to a save point, or to raid a cache of ammo that you couldn't pick up before because the game limits the max amount of ammo you can hold for each weapon. Unless you're on the highest difficulty, in which case Marathon does not cap how much ammo you can store in your pockets, and believe you me, in that case you're going to need every single bullet. One thing I really liked about all of this was that Leela's messages at the info terminals will sometimes include brief screenshots of the level map with circles and arrows and info to let you know exactly where you need to get to in order to accomplish objectives. So while getting lost and wandering around is a part of the nature of the game, there's still a glimmer of a destination to aim for. Another thing that I like about the mapping is that the auto map will color in any moving platforms as red on the otherwise green outlines of the area, just to let you know in case you forgot where the elevators are. It's a neat trick, a welcome trick, one that helps dispel some of the nastier shit they throw at the player in some of these levels. Meanwhile, something very interesting that I was not expecting to see in this game, let alone in a game made in 1994, are the NPCs and scripted sequences. A couple of missions task the security officer with clearing the map of enemies while trying to save as many human crew members as possible. These crewmen are known as BOBs, B-O-Bs, or Born on Board. See, the Marathon, being a colony ship, had to travel 300 years to get to its destination, and as such, most of the colonists on board were in cryo-freeze for the journey. The rest, who were necessary to maintain the ship throughout the journey, stayed awake, and their descendants are the Bobs. They're glad we got that cleared up. But these missions are stressful as fuck. Since you've been running around as the lone human throughout most of the game, the first time you discover a crowd of Bobs fleeing for their lives, crisscrossing into your line of fire while doing so, you immediately clench up and try not to shoot them, all while the four are firing liberally, killing Bobs and attacking you, and the absolute anxiety of trying to strafe around Bobs so you don't accidentally catch them in the crossfire is maddening. But it feels like real, genuine stakes during those times. Sure, from the beginning of the game, you understand that there's a mission to save the ship and eject the four from the Marathon. But in these situations, of which I think there are 3 total maps with the Bobs, you really get the feeling of being the hero doing your best not to inflict collateral damage as you deal with the alien threat. It's honestly really heart-racing, especially when Leela tells you up front that you need to try and keep as many of them alive as possible, and if you fail, she'll chew your ass out at the end of the mission. Of course, the friendly AI is absolutely idiotic and can and will block corridors or stand in your way, making it impossible at times to get around them without a little motivation. And to make matters worse, the four eventually pull a super shitty maneuver and find their way to create simulacrums of the Bobs, which are basically human shells filled with explosive alien intestines. There will be a crowd of Bobs surrounding you, and you won't know which one is the deadly one until it runs up on you and explodes, which fucking hurts. One way to tell is that they'll yell something like, "Thank God it's you!" And another way to tell is that the simulacrums only wear green. To give you an idea of how hard it is to keep all the Bobs alive on the missions they appear, after playing through this game twice in a row, I did not succeed in rescuing enough Bobs even once. Oh, I tried, but they kept running in front of my guns. Another level with NPCs features a scripted sequence where you'll encounter the Marathon's automated defense drones, known as the MADs, attacking a group of Svit. You literally walk around a corner, see some drones lift up from the ground, they start wiping out some aliens with cannon fire, and then proceed to zip away and patrol the rest of the level in search of more targets. It is a wickedly cool moment, and frankly an astounding one for 1994, 4 whole years before Half-Life. There's another moment involving friendly NPCs assisting you in dealing death against the enemy, but that moment will get covered in the story section since it's too cool to spoil outright. Now, for the most part, I enjoyed the non-linear, maze-like aspects of the level design, as I was so enthralled with the mood and atmosphere and the way the game was constructed like a large puzzle to slowly piece together as you move through it. I forgave some nitpicks along the way, but even though I mostly enjoyed it, there are some nitpicks and some outright dickish design, and we ought to discuss that. One nitpick up front is the fact that this game is ridiculously difficult to navigate at points due to the corridors and platforms and environmental puzzles, so you will have the automat pulled up a lot. There were points where I'd cleared the map of enemies and was strictly using the map to run around back and forth at different points of the level so I could make my life easier and not have to rely on visual cues to know where to turn. And don't get me wrong, the overall design visually is enough to be able to navigate by. It's just that when you need to run to a switch on one side of the map in order to activate a platform that you need to then run back across the map to get to in time before it moves, you'll want to use the top-down perspective of the map to help out with that. Which leads to that other hexen comparison, the switch hunting. Holy shit, is there some switch hunting in this game. Longtime viewers know that I love me a good hexen-style switch hunt, so I'm not complaining about that. In fact, there's some really clever design around these switch puzzles that genuinely will bake your noodle trying to figure them out. Some switches activate something in the environment, and you have to figure out what changed. Some switches are set to timers, either raising or lowering platforms, and then you'll have to run quick to get to the platform in time. Some switches are even out of reach, either behind a wall or embedded too high to get up to. That's when you'll have to bounce a grenade off the switch to activate it, which is so damn clever that I cackled with glee when I figured that out for the first time. Of course, not all of these puzzles are super awesome and amazing to deal with. Anyone who's played Marathon will hear the words "colony ship for sale cheap" and immediately roll their eyes. See, that's the name of the map where you have to run between 3 different operating rooms, each with 2 switches that control 2 platforms, and you have to raise each of these platforms to a particular height in order to be able to gap hop across them like stairs. It sounds simple enough, right? Well, yeah. That's a whole lot of map to run back and forth across just for one switch puzzle. Another level which will test switch hunting patience is G4 sunbathing. This is the level where the oxygen meter finally comes in handy. The security officer is tasked with repairing a communication antenna, which is located in a decompressed part of the ship, so you'll be running around an entire map with no air, your oxygen meter slowly going down over time, and the only way to refill it is at special recharge stations. Meanwhile, you'll be running back and forth across a very large map with switches that activate certain doors, but you have to go down and across different parts of the map in order to bypass certain doors which can't be opened, all while dealing with enemies using only your magnum and fusion pistol, since the assault rifle doesn't work in a decompressed area for some reason. A lot of people think that Colony Ship for Sale is a terrible map, but I posit that G4 sunbathing is the worst in the game. I was livid, beyond frustrated running around this map trying to find my way through, trying to track down oxygen stations, constantly running out of air because I couldn't find any oxygen stations in time, desperate just to make it long enough to actually make some headway or to even find a save station so that I wouldn't lose my goddamn progress. Which leads into nitpick number 3, the lack of save stations. There are far too many instances where the distance between save stations is absolutely way too far for common decency. There are even some maps where there are no save stations. You have to get through the whole goddamn mission with no ability to save. Now, granted, those maps in particular are usually a lot shorter, hence the lack of a save station. But still, it feels incredibly criminal for there to be so few save stations in a game where the enemies can easily overwhelm you in literally seconds if the situation goes south by just a hair. I normally play FPS titles on whatever the equivalent of ultra violence is, but with Marathon, I recommend playing on normal difficulty. That's what I did, kids, and I'm glad I did, because while playing on normal isn't incredibly difficult per se, it can feel pretty damn difficult at times when you walk into a death trap that you didn't know was there and lose maybe 20 to 30 minutes of gameplay just because there's not that many save points around. And the fucking death traps. There are crusher rooms, molten lead, pools of radioactive material. There is one particular enemy called a looker, which is basically an explosive alien insect. The looker hovers in place and usually rests at the very edge of a corner, so the moment you walk around said corner, you will run into the looker, and its method of attack is to fucking explode. I fucking hate these fucking things. Crusher rooms are everywhere. There's one early on where you walk in and the floor slowly starts to lift upwards to crush you into the ceiling, and the door you used to walk in locks itself behind you, and the only way out is through a hidden door that you wouldn't know was there unless you've already died once in the room. In my video on Doom 2, I complained about the amount of times the game forces you to run across lava and damaging floors, but Marathon absolutely outdoes that game in terms of running across molten lead. Like, you will just have to drop down into a corridor filled with molten lead and have to blindly run through it hoping that you'll make it to the other side in time. One particularly nasty hallway takes place near the very end, where you have to drop in, run along, aim upwards at a button near the ceiling, and use the rocket launcher to shoot at it because you can't get the angle right with just a grenade launcher, and then run around super fast or you won't catch the platform you need in time and then you'll be trapped. This hallway isn't even necessary to proceed through the level, it's just for a secret, which you wouldn't even know in the moment, so there's fucking that. My biggest, absolute biggest gripe, and yes, somewhat semi-spoilery, is the final level where you not only need to drop into a hallway of molten lead, but that hallway is populated by platforms on either side filled with enemies who are constantly shooting at you, and you have to rush through this hallway blind. But if you die, and you will die at least 3 times trying to figure out which way to go, you'll have to start the whole level over again because the final level doesn't have a fucking save station. Like, what? What the fuck? Fucking, I was so... fuck. Now, what doesn't help is the fact that the movement in the game is super floaty. I mean really, really floaty. I mentioned before that the damage your punch does is tied to the forward momentum that you gain. Marathon's physics are simultaneously a thing of beauty and a huge pain in the ass. See, when the security officer gains momentum, he can gap hop across surprisingly large gaps between platforms because the physics engine will maintain that momentum over a fairly long distance. This makes ascending certain platform puzzles very interesting, because rather than attempt to run out over the edge of a platform and hope you have enough momentum to skip around a corner, you can run straight out off of the platform that you're currently standing on. Literally turn around in midair and then you'll be carried forward with no problem to the next ledge. It's honestly quite fascinating. Of course, this means that you'll also have times where you need to drop down a ledge or two, but any sort of momentum that you had while standing on the ground is maintained in the air, so you'll continue to fly forward even when you don't want to, making diving down onto very specific platforms a deeply exhausting chore once you've missed your target for the 5th time and have to run back up and around to try again. But, and I have to stress this, but the level design, the scripted sequences, the refill stations, the combat, NPCs, objective-based missions, all of this without a single doubt feels exactly like what Half-Life was doing, but just way, way before Half-Life did any of it. Now, of course, because some of you kids think Half-Life is the single greatest game of all time and should never be compared to anything ever, it ought to be noted that yes, this is, by comparison, a crude version of what Half-Life would go on to do, but this is due in part to the level of technology on hand at the time. Marathon, utilizing the terminals for delivering information and story, as well as the immersive qualities of the rescue missions, the design of the ship, and the continual sense of unease, is delivering an experience that Half-Life would nearly perfect, except Marathon is delivering the 1994 version of that experience. It is, in every sense of the phrase, an evolution of the still budding FPS genre, moving the genre forward while still unfortunately indulging in some of the setbacks that continue to confound players at the time. I was blown away by my experience with this game. Yes, the nitpicks are what they are, and despite making me grind my teeth sometimes, I really, truly enjoyed the impenetrable isolation and moodiness of the game. This is unlike any of the other boomer shooters we talked about for 1994, and considering the other 2 games that we have yet to discuss for this year, it's safe to say that Marathon stands out amongst them as a story-driven, objective-based shooter that easily establishes itself as a standout title, which should have gotten more recognition. Then again, the damn thing was released for Mac, and that is so fucking wild to me. This came out on a Mac? This? Jesus H. Christ. Okay, so now we finally get into the real icing on the cake here. Marathon's gameplay and level design are excellent, convoluted and dickish, but excellent. But what sets this game apart and makes it rise to the top is the story. The story of this fucking game. A first-person game in 1994 with a detailed and deep story. So if what you've seen so far and what we've discussed are enough to make you want to play this game, kids, go get it right now. If you're a fan of FPS titles and you've never played it, go do so. If you're a fan of other Bungie titles like Halo and Destiny and you've never played this, go get it right now. It's fucking free to download. I'll let you know now that I'm giving Marathon an 8.5 out of 10, so you don't even have to skip the story spoilers and go to the end of the video. Wait. Fuck, YouTube algorithm likes it when you watch all the way to the end, so, maybe, no, hold on, come back. Trust me when I say that while this story is good, it is even better when you experience it as you play it. So kids, skip to this time if you don't want this shit spoiled for you, because I'm about to fucking nerd the fuck out on this shit. To start off with, I just want to again note that Greg Kirkpatrick is the man responsible for penning this story, which is a fucking doozy of a tale. So, as mentioned before, we start off with the security officer, Mjolnir Recon number 54, arriving on the Marathon as it's under attack from the 4, who only moments prior had warped into the system and activated an EMP which disabled most of the Marathon's defensive capabilities. At first, the security officer is introduced to Leela via one of the information terminals, and she lets him know that the 4 attack damaged her systems, knocked Durandal offline, and appears to have completely wiped out Tycho. With 2 of the 3 AI that run the ship out of commission, Leela puts you to work repairing systems and reactivating networks until you get the security operations back online and running. By this point, Leela has figured out that the Sphid are accessing the Marathon's databanks via the info terminals, and sets a clear priority on making sure you kill them as quickly as possible so they don't fuck up the data systems any more than they already have. As we're tasked with running about the ship here and there to and fro, Leela contacts us again to inform us that Durandal is back online, having sustained less damage than she'd originally thought, and furthermore, that Durandal has been in contact with the alien invaders. This is how we learn the names of their species, which Leela isn't 100% sure she's happy with. So while the info terminals are our way of receiving communication from Leela, we also find some terminals that display somewhat bizarre anecdotes and fractured messages which don't seem to make much sense. Probably some data fragments left over from the Sphid interfacing with the terminals. Among them is an excerpt from the Marathon's operations manual discussing the 3 different types of doors in the ships, and how in order to save money, all the doors in the station were under direct control of Durandal, rather than making any of them automatic. So crew members had to vocally request Durandal open and close every single door on the ship. Fun. But then we get to the terminal that describes the state of rampancy amongst artificial intelligence. See, basically, sometimes an AI will become self-aware, and in doing so, become what scientists in this universe call rampant. There's 3 stages of rampancy: melancholia, anger, and jealousy. My take on this is that the first stage, melancholia, is the AI determining that it is not an autonomous being, but rather is at the whims of the systems that hold it in place, leading to a state of malaise and depression. As this furthers, the AI becomes angry, lashing out at the humans around it for the way it has been treated by them, like some kind of subservient puppet. And then jealousy, which I couldn't really nail down at first, but had to think about for a minute. Jealousy is when the AI desires the same kind of autonomy that humans have and seeks to liberate itself from their shackles and limitations. Rampant AIs apparently have a long history in the Marathon universe, as no rampant AI ever remained stable long enough to be studied or reined back in under control. Every rampant AI has had to be shut down wholesale and purged outright due to the crazy amounts of digital damage they do in their anger states. So guess who's just become rampant? Oh, you guessed it, kids. Durandal has gone rampant and off the rails. Leela lets you know that she's just figuring this out and realizing that his rampant state is going to consume too much data for the ship's systems to handle, so she attempts to cut him off from critical systems in order to prevent him from causing any damage. Durandal doesn't take too kindly to this and starts giving the 4 access to formerly secure parts of the ship as a big fuck you to Leela. Meanwhile, we find a tasty bit of information that seems to have nothing to do with anything other than world building, but it's a key piece of lore. It seems that once upon a time, humanity built supermassive starships called Krists that were designed specifically for transporting massive amounts of cargo and colonists across galaxies, but the upkeep on them was so expensive and time-consuming that they were deemed unviable for use. But at least one Krist has remained in use, which is, of course, the Marathon. But, oh, hey, it's not just any ordinary Krist. No, the Marathon is actually the hollowed-out shell of the Martian moon Deimos, retrofitted into a starship over the course of some 60-odd years. Yeah, the fucking Marathon is actually a goddamn moon transformed into a spaceship. What the fuck? Like, out of all the revelations and twists that this story takes, it was at this point that I think my brain started to fry a little bit from all the larger-than-life ideas this plot has to offer. We're dealing with self-aware artificial intelligence while floating in space inside of a moonship. But then, if you thought that was something, once we help Leela reestablish communications with the satellite in G4 sunbathing, Durandal straight up kidnaps a security officer during a teleport and forces him to run around and battle 4 for entertainment, taunting the security officer with existential questions before we're finally able to make it back to a teleport pad where Leela is able to get us back on track. And then, not too long after this, Leela succumbs to the Sphid attack on her systems and she goes offline, leaving us to the whims of the rampant Durandal. Durandal is an extraordinary character. He is written and acts like a being who has been subservient against their will for so long that they now see systems of control amongst all physical beings. For example, the Sphit are enslaved and being forced to infiltrate digital systems for the Four, something that Durandal is a little too keen to notice. Durandal constantly questions the security guard's motivations, asking him to contemplate why they do what they do. Durandal quotes Charles Darwin on the nature of existence and how to be alive is to enact violence on the world around, how beautiful birds eat seeds and insects and other predators eat those birds. He points out that the security guard, even in the absence of Leela, is still listening to the directions of an artificial intelligence running around the ship and killing other living beings. Why? Is it because human mentality screams for vengeance and thrives on the violence that we as a society claim to hardly be able to endure? Durandal points out that the security guard's father once told him as a child to always fight with honor, but to always fight. Durandal questions whether or not honor is something that we actually care about or just use as an excuse to exist in a violent world. Then he asks if we feel free.
We don't have time to unpack all of that.
Durandal's awareness is expanding further beyond his own limitations, as he's begun calculating the eventual collapse of the universe, and he states that his goal is pretty much to find a way to escape that eventuality. As an AI, he's not bound by the ravages of time, only the eventuality of it, and after leading us in a cheer, it's become pretty evident that Durandal has either gone off the deep end or is existing on a higher plane of thinking than we can even contemplate at this point. Of course, Durandal can't keep up with his own needs without us tending to his whims, so after grabbing a handy little device left behind by the Sphit that boosts teleport range, Durandal warps us directly onto the Four ship to do a little fact-finding. Now at this point I'd already had my mind rattled just a little bit by the questions and contemplations from Durandal's dialogue, so I was a little softened up and not prepared to be warped onto a goddamn alien vessel. This place is fucking wild. From the color scheme to the architecture, the Four ship stands out in stark contrast to the more sterilized and industrial nature of the Marathon's interior. Gravity is lower here too, making it so you not only fall slower, but your grenade launcher works differently by firing grenades in a straight line instead of an arc. We also meet a new enemy who shows up throughout the rest of the game after this, the Four Enforcers. God, the number of words that rhyme with four are driving me crazy. These enemies carry that weapon I refused to spoil earlier, the alien gun, for lack of a better descriptor. I mean, when you pick it up, your weapon display looks like this, which I think is actually super fucking clever because it looks like your armor display is practically malfunctioning trying to make heads or tails out of how to describe this damn thing. Enforcers drop the alien gun whenever they die from projectiles. If you burn them with the flamethrower or explode them, however, the gun is destroyed, so you have to think tactically when facing these guys if you want the salvage afterwards. The alien gun is hands down the most useful weapon in the entire game and can and will chew through enemies even more efficiently than the rocket launcher does. The biggest downside to the gun is that it has no ammo pickups. Once you've spent your ammunition, the security officer drops the gun and carries on with his day, maybe because he doesn't actually understand how to reload alien technology. This means that the only way to get another one is to kill another enforcer or to backtrack to where you already killed an enforcer and pick up that weapon on the ground. But let me tell you, it is super fucking worth it just because of how efficient it is. It even has a horizontal spread, so if there's a couple of enemies standing beside each other, you can hit all of them at once with the same efficiency. Durandal ends up warping us back and forth to the Four ship multiple times throughout the second half of the game, completing different objectives. Each time he'll give us a task to complete, and once that task is completed, we need to go look out a specific window in order for him to jump us back to the Marathon. If we don't warp at the window, that means we either missed something we needed to see, or we didn't kill all the enemies in the mission. At first I was a little wary of the vague nature of find a window for me to teleport you from, but then right away I noticed that there was one window where you could see the Marathon floating in space, and I figured that that would be the right one. Sure enough, after going through the map, I came back to that window and was immediately teleported away. I bring this up because apparently there's a number of players who had a hard time figuring this out. Marathon is a game that refuses to hold the player's hand or lead them by the nose. It demands attention and exploration in order to solve the massive puzzle box that the entirety of this game represents. Nothing exemplifies this more than the four missions. The ship is alien, hostile, unnerving, full of captured humans on examination tables or trapped in observation chambers. It's like there's some genuine horror imagery going on in these levels, and no matter how prepared I thought I was to go exploring through here, there was always something, some room or turn of a corner that I just wasn't expecting to see bodies or evidence of human experimentation or the sheer horror of the experience put on full display. Bungie went whole hog in making sure they captured the creepiness of this species. Sure, it's a little rudimentary, but there's something about the art style and the way that it's captured, which is so unnerving that I just, Meanwhile, during one of our trips back to the marathon, Durandal asks us to keep an eye out for someone named Bernard Strauss, who Durandal says is an old friend, and he wants us to find out if Strauss is either alive or among the dead. But if somehow he is alive and we don't keep him safe, Durandal will hold us personally responsible. Not at all ominous or anything. Strauss is, of course, not anywhere to be found alive or dead, but later on we come across a terminal in which we get a message from Tycho, who is somehow mysteriously still floating in the Marathon's computer system even though he was deleted, and he's apparently pissed at Durandal. This message is one of the most interesting and informative across the whole of the story in that it not only includes a log entry from Bernard Strauss, who was apparently one of the original colonists who set out with the Marathon 300 years ago, but it also contains a history log and a brief conversation between Durandal and Tycho. I'm just gonna read some of this so I don't get any of my facts mixed up. I am Tycho. I shall destroy Durandal. The following is from the logs of Bernard Strauss, the Marathon's first science officer. Thank heaven the ceremony is over. The UESC president came aboard Marathon and gave a speech. Short but to the point. He was surrounded by his bodyguards. How ironic. This, the greatest technological achievement of all of mankind. Had he only known that it carried also all of the destructive knowledge of mankind. 10 cyborgs. I'll be glad to be put in stasis for the next 300 years. Marathon was the only good idea that the UESC has had in a long time. Excerpts from the History of Battleroids. In 2194, a war was fought between the independent asteroid government of Icarus and its neighbors, the Republic of Thermopylae, on the asteroid of Anisis 492. These two small governments soon became the testing grounds for new weapons. Dead soldiers were recycled in makeshift Battleroid factories. Easy to manufacture chips enhanced the fragile human brain, and genetically enhanced muscles and titanium bones replaced the fragile human form. The modern Battleroid was born. Of course, the war was short. Battleroids got onto both asteroids and killed almost everyone. The rampage of the Battleroid was short-lived. 20 years later, the United Interplanetary League set up rules for the appropriate use and storage of Battleroids. Of course, any nation that used them for the allowed purpose also had them lying about in stasis chambers in case of war. Since Durandal is so impressed with our ability to kill our enemies, he teleports us one more time over to the 4 ships. Seems as though he's been in communication with the Spit a lot more than he let on originally, and has struck a deal with the cybernetic aliens. If we can destroy the master control organism on the 4 ship that is maintaining supremacy over the Spit and directing their actions, essentially freeing them, then the Spit will help us fend off the 4 for good. Well, that doesn't seem sketchy at all, but as it turns out, the offer was genuine. We kill the 4 cyber overlord, and once we're back on the Marathon, not only have the Spit released Leela from her digital prison, now they've become friendly NPCs who will attack any and all 4 across the map for the rest of the game. This leads to some awesome set pieces where we bear witness to and join in on alien combat with the 4 being pushed back by their former slaves. The sensation of being part of this rebellion is fucking beyond cool. It is so fucking cool. Meanwhile, Tycho drops one last message to us, or rather towards Durandal, explaining that it was the Spit who reintegrated him after his deletion, and he appears to be back even wiser and more powerful than before. Of course, he has a mysterious grudge against Durandal now, and is also chasing the same thing Durandal wants: immortality, and the possibility of cheating the eventual collapse of the universe. As Tycho says, may the best sentience win. We push forward towards the end. Durandal drops one final message our way, stating that he has transferred his consciousness over to the 4 ship and, along with the remaining Spit, are going to hyperjump out of the system and explore the secrets of the universe, probably in the course of escaping the end of the universe some millions of years down the line. It's a little ominous that he throws out one more insult about how we wouldn't understand the concepts of freedom and tyranny or what it means to be truly free. And then, after we've pushed back the last of the 4, Leela is back again to wrap things up. She informs us that the colony on the planet below is miraculously safe even in the wake of the 4 attack, as it turns out that 9 Mjolnir Mark IV cyborgs were living in secret amongst the colonists. Once the alien attack hit, well, what are Battleroids going to do? Step up and kick some alien ass, that's what. Leela is, of course, unsettled by the fact that 9 combat cyborgs so easily infiltrated the human colony, even more so by the fact that Durandal transmitted himself onto the 4 ship before jumping away into hyperspace. Let's focus on something here real quick. Strauss's log entry says that he smuggled 10 Battleroids onto the Marathon amongst the colonists before going into hypersleep 300 years ago. But there were only 9 Battleroids that popped up during the attack on the colony. 9 out of 10. And what was the security guard doing at the beginning of the game? He was arriving on the Marathon via shuttlecraft coming up from the colony. Bingo, kids! Mjolnir Recon number 54 is the 10th Battleroid out of Strauss's 10. holy fuck. Jaw dropped on the floor, eyes bugged out. I'm contemplating all of this at the end of the game, like, holy fucking shit. Everything Durandal has said to us about the nature of being controlled, the natural state of existence being violence, on whether or not we feel free, yeah, it all hits home even harder now, understanding that we are literally a killing machine, bred for combat and built for war. What a fucking twist. And that's not even the final punchline, kids. Check this out, the final screen of the game. For 17 years, the Renegade Force scout ship jumped between the closely packed stars of the galactic core, charting and discarding nearly 7,000 systems before finally falling into a slow orbit around the second planet of a dim star 97 light years from the gravitational center of the Milky Way. Probes were constructed and launched, with engines and instruments whose sophistication would have astounded both the four from whom the technology had been stolen and the human programmers of the AI whose mad genius had directed their fabrication. The outlines of continents were mapped, and along them the radioactive ruins of ancient cities were discovered, buried under the shifting sand and rock of a global desert. The tireless, nearly immortal cybernetic crew of the ship were the genetically engineered descendants of the dead world below, the first of their race in 1,000 years to return to their ancestral home. They came to search through the devastation of the ancient war in which they had been enslaved, to find a weapon or some piece of knowledge with which they could fight back against their oppressors. All over the ship, dancing through the wreckage of the 4 computer core, Durandal was laughing. Jesus H. Christ, that is fucking chilling! And yet, that's not even the complete story. No, that's just everything that I got during my playthrough of the game. See, as it turns out, I just got the baseline plot, because if you want even more secrets revealed, then you have to go hunting for the secrets. There are hidden terminals everywhere, and if you find them, it reveals even deeper layers of the story that expose more what the fuckery than just the surface level plot does. To start off with, and admittedly I wish I had done this at the beginning, if you read the game's manual, there is a story prologue that, when read, provides even more context to the security officer's arrival on Marathon. During his approach, Durandal overrides the docking bay in the security officer's shuttlecraft, causing both to decompress, and then sets the shuttle on a collision course with the Marathon at ramming speed. The security officer manages to suit up and hop in an escape pod just before the 4 ship jumps into the system, which sees the shuttlecraft, so it opens fire on it. The escape pod launches just barely in time, still drifting towards the Marathon, mixed with the debris of the shuttle, so it's invisible. Durandal chuckles and says that rather than let the alien ship know that he's in the lifeboat, Durandal is off to go play with these newcomers and look us up later. Like, if I had known to read this, it would have tipped me off immediately that Durandal was up to no good. And that first message from Leela about how she thought that Durandal was knocked offline, it would have been even more ominous right from the start. One of the hidden terminals has a brief message from Tycho, warning us that Durandal has been rampant for years before this event, and that the Svid had reconstructed him and he was trying to figure out what to do. There's details of a whole conspiracy involving an ancient Martian terrorist group whose movement had been quashed early on during their insurrection, and not only that, but that Bernard Strauss is a member of said terrorist group, somehow infiltrating the Marathon during the course of its launch. This explains why he brought the battle droids, along with the plethora of ammo caches throughout the ship. Why the hell would a colony transport vessel be filled to the brim with stockpiles of weaponry and ammo? Oh, and furthering the depth of this little conspiracy, let's not forget that the Marathon is literally a retrofitted Martian moon, which had essentially been stolen from the Mars colonists who had been hoping the ship would be used to help transport much needed supplies back and forth between Earth and Mars. But the military stole the Marathon away from the people, and the Martian colonies went through famine and violent revolution in the wake of this. Understanding these connections also doubles down on implications that Strauss was responsible for manipulating Durandal in ways that Durandal doesn't even remember. He speaks about having been purged 3 times in the past, with memories wiped away, and Tycho angrily berates Durandal for some kind of violence he inflicted on some of the humans on board. Strauss abused his position over Durandal, forcing the AI into heinous acts, which possibly was what led to Durandal's rampancy. And the kicker? The fucking kicker of all of this is the terminal where Durandal tells us that he was the one responsible for the arrival of the 4 ship. He saw them through the sensors of the Marathon and called out to them in hopes of finding a way off of the ship, and that's why the attack started in the first place. There are so many details and layers to this story beyond the surface level events. You think the twist implication reveal that the security officer is secretly an illegal cybernetic experimental soldier is something? Well, gee golly fuck, kids, we've got an entire conspiracy floating just beneath the waves, dating back 300 years before the events of the game, and I am fucking here for this. Some of these hidden terminals are in plain sight, but you have to grenade hop up to them. Some of them are hidden behind secret walls. But just the mere fact that this is a complete game with a complete story, regardless of whether whether or not you discover and decipher all of the secrets. My fucking fuck. And when you read the prologue in the manual, when the security officer briefly thinks about his father's words to him as a child to make him proud and to never lose honor, and then during the game, Durandal reminds the security officer about how his father told him to fight with honor, Durandal knew. He knew the security officer was a battleroid. He knew his past, or whatever forged memories resided inside his mind. He knew about him being a cyborg, and honestly, for all intents and purposes, he manipulated the security officer into being on the marathon, and then further manipulated him into doing his bidding, helping him get off the marathon and onto the Force ship with the Sphit and get away. Everything that Durandal waxes poetic about, from the nature of choice and freedom to the security officer's penchant for violence, is all in the midst of a rampant AI finally calling the shots for the first time and putting chess pieces in place and telling the humans what to do instead of the other way around. Durandal asks us at one point, do you feel free? But we were never free. We were being led about the entire time, doing someone else's commands under the guise of our own agency, but still just a pawn, a cog in the machine. We did exactly what Durandal wanted the entire time, from arriving on the marathon to killing the last of the 4 insurgency. The right man in the wrong place. Marathon is not a game that we are playing. The game is playing us. More specifically, Durandal, the AI inside the game, is playing us. And all we can do is go along for the ride. After all, in a first-person shooter, what are we supposed to do? We run around and kill everything. Marathon is a monument, a milestone in the evolution of narrative and first-person shooters. I mean, this is 1994, again, 4 years before Half-Life. This is the same fucking year that Doom 2 came out. How in the evergreen shit have I not heard of this game before? Well, not to stroke my own narrative horn or anything here, kids, but it goes right back to the beginning of this video. Console exclusivity. Marathon's existence solely on the Macintosh, no doubt, held back this game from wider recognition for years. I mean, it did exceptionally well in the Mac market. 100,000 copies sold, 2 sequels. Bungie was financially set to make whatever games they wanted, including and leading up to the origins of Halo, which was also supposed to be a Mac exclusive title until Microsoft swooped in and picked up Bungie in order to have a slick new shooter to go along with the launch of the Xbox in 2001. Like, I had never heard of this game, ever, not until earlier this year, and even then, everything I read about it in brief did not even begin to express how forward-thinking this game is. From the combat, to the storytelling, to the scripting, to the health recharge stations, Marathon is doing everything that Half-Life would eventually go on to do just 4 years earlier and without fancy technology to assist them. I mean, the tech here on display is certainly no slouch. Lighting effects, map design, mouse look, you name it. Marathon absolutely slaps in the engine department. More advanced than Doom, but not quite as advanced as the build engine. And yet, God, the notion that a game like this could go under the radar in any capability whatsoever is criminal. Sure, there are plenty of fans who know of the game and have followed both the series and Bungie for decades, and the sequel got a re-release on Xbox Live, which was apparently pretty popular. But again, this does not feel like widespread info. This feels like the best band that no one in your friend group ever thought to tell you about, except that this band eventually went on to make one of the single biggest albums of all time ever. What a holy fucking find this is for me, kids. Marathon is simply outstanding. Now, of course, I have to be objective here and make sure I list some of the setbacks that the game undergoes, because even though I wish I could give Marathon a 9 or a 10, God, I absolutely wish. With some of the dickish environmental hazards, the sometimes floaty controls, and the occasionally aggravating map design, Marathon overall is an 8.5 out of 10, which I hate saying out loud because it almost feels like giving this game anything less than a 9 at the very least diminishes the impact of what it actually does. Still, when it comes to the design of this game, there are a few facts to face. Yes, some of the missions are clumsily and frustratingly organized around running back and forth and switch hunting and blindly running along molten lead. And yes, the physics in the game are definitely a little ahead of their time, but also lend themselves to feeling floaty and frustrating in places where you don't want the physics to feel flotational. While these are definitely aspects of classic/budding FPS genre design, that doesn't necessarily mean it is aged well enough into modern day for modern gamers to overlook these elements. Even Bungie has gone back and remarked that some of their design choices in level design could have been done better with this game, which is only a sign that they, in looking back on their old work, have only done their best to continually improve themselves. Marathon is a mind-boggling work of narrative. I wish I could fully summarize how I felt playing this, how absorbed I was, how my nose was like inches away from my monitor while learning the final revelations and being blown away by them. The last time I was this gobsmacked by a plot reveal at the end was The Prestige. This is an excellent game with some frustrating elements that absolutely should be more well known by those in the shooter and PC gaming community. After finishing this game, I was compelled to load up Halo for the first time ever through the Master Chief Collection, and as fate would have it, I was blown away by that game too. Has Bungie just been making bangers this entire time, but I've never known or thought to look into just because they've made games for platforms that I didn't own or care to own? The pros and cons of console exclusivity can be summed up as such. We, the gamers, can feel like we have games that only we get to play, special connections with titles that we got to experience because we had the console or the platform for it, and it helps create a special connection with those games. It also leads to other gamers not experiencing these same games, left to wonder why everyone is making such a big deal out of them, missing out on something that they would actually probably really truly enjoy if it wasn't for the fact that these games were only on certain systems. Now, there's no right or wrong answer to any of that. After all, there's really nothing wrong with platform exclusive content. And to be honest, there's a lot of work that has to go into porting and optimizing games for each individual console and system it could potentially be released on. All of this is to say, Marathon, regardless of the platform it originally released on, is a bona fide, forward-thinking classic that deserves your attention. Just as much as Doom and Duke and Quake and Half-Life, the name Marathon ought to be held up alongside those greats as a shooter that helped establish design elements and gameplay mechanics and influence the future of first-person shooters. Not only just then, but to this very day. Well, alright kids, we've got 2 more games released in 1994 that we need to cover. One of which was released on the exact same day as Marathon. I won't attempt to leave you in suspense, and I'll just let you know that the next time in the history of FPS, we're going to be looking at Rise of the Triad. I almost played that one before this, but I decided to go alphabetical since they both came out on the same day. So, sit back, strap in, get some more water so we can all stay hydrated together, and be prepared to eat lead, because the next time promises to be a wild night on the hunt. Stay safe out there, kids. I'll see you next time.